Good to see everybody back this afternoon. Appreciate everybody being here. I was kind of taken aback a little bit. I have a sack full of really neat treats sitting there that has Jeff written on it. And I don't know who gave it to me, but I need to tell somebody thank you. And then I also need to find out if I have to share Liz and Kelly. But anyway, I do want to say thank you, whomever it was that gave me that sweet gift. And no, I love candy. Let it out of the bag, it's candy. Anyway, good to see everybody here. I don't know whether you have ever been guilty of this or not. I have. I know the embarrassment of it, of presuming something, assuming something that you know, I made a decision about something before I got the data in, and then discovered I was not correct. I had, you know, speaking of candy, I heard about the teacher that had a bunch of kids in class, and they were all getting together, and they was going to get the teacher presents. And so they were getting their presents based on what their folks did. And so the florist, the guy that had a flower shop, this kid came to the teacher and had this big, beautiful bouquet of flowers, and it was just wonderful. She was so grateful, said, thank you so much, and took the flowers, put them in a vase on her desk. And the next kid came up, and his dad had a candy shop. And he came up with this big box of chocolates, and you know how it is, life's like a box of chocolates. I was so thankful, and so she took the box of chocolates, and then a little kid came up, and his daddy ran a liquor store. And so she picked up the box from the kid, and it was kind of heavy, and she noticed it was kind of leaking. And of course, kids being what kids are, she said, oh no. And so she wanted to be nice. She set the box on the table, and she touched her finger in the fluid and tasted it and said, is this wine? And the little kid, no. So she tasted it again. Is it champagne? And he couldn't help himself. No, it's a puppy. Sometimes when we make assumptions, I think sometimes it gets us in trouble because we don't get all the data in. And this guy is a classic, and I just want to analyze briefly on a few short verses what it is this guy did and why maybe he made the mistake many of us often do, and that is assuming something before we get the data in. You'll notice that this guy was a great leader, okay? And I want to note something about great leaders. Great leaders have great people around them, and we're going to get to that in the conclusion a little later on. But this guy was no dummy, okay? He made his living as a battle man. He was a warrior. He was a guy who would look out on the field and judge his enemy correctly. And so one of the things I want to look at here is the fact that this guy was not one given to random assumptions, of which we're all guilty sometimes. But that was not his habit. This guy was a battle guy. He knew how to fight people. And you just don't go flying down through there flailing your sword. You plan, you prepare, you anticipate the enemy and what they're going to do. You know about your enemy. This guy was not a dummy. Okay? So one of the things, the lessons we can take away from this is we're all susceptible to this. I don't care how smart you are, how well planned you are, if you're OCD, ADHD, or whatever other alphabet thing you've got a problem with, if you can figure out how to do things in an orderly fashion and you take in all the data, you're still susceptible to making some assumptions. Be very careful how we make our assumptions, because this guy made an assumption. He had a dread disease. And when he found out that he had this dread disease, he found out there was a guy that could heal him, Elisha. And so he called to the king, who was over Elisha and all the people there, and said, hey, I need help. Now, I think it's funny, and there's just some things that make me laugh as I read through in private readings. But in chapter 5, verse 7, but it happened when the king of Israel read the letter saying, hey, I'm coming over there to get healed of leprosy. You're going to make it happen. It's like, the dude is picking a fight with me. That's what he's doing. He read the letter, am I God to kill and to make alive? This man sends me a man to heal him of his leprosy? Therefore, please consider and see how he seeks to quarrel with me. Why, he's looking for a fight here. And of course, one of the things that this king did not, and this just kind of gives you the sense of where Israel was at this time. Kings were not looking to God for answers to their issues, much like the leaders of our country. Not looking to God for understanding about how we deal with conflict and controversy. What should we do? This king just decided all is lost because he's trying to pick a fight with me. And Elisha, this man of God, in verse 8, heard the king of Israel was having all this grief and said he needs to know, and really all of the people then needed to know, there's a God in Israel who can take care of these kinds of things. And so when that was discovered, Naaman went out, verse 9, with his horses and chariots. He came to Elisha's house. Must have been quite a fanfare for a general of his rank and stature to just show up out of nowhere in full panoply, I'm sure. All of his guard and his retinue with him, and show up at the doorstep. And of course Elisha, being the smooth guy that he was, sent a messenger to the door instead of coming himself. That was something. And told him, go wash in the Jordan 7 times. Now, that phrase that was read just a few moments ago, behold, I thought, has history in our family. I don't know whether it's my dad that started or my grandpa. I'm not sure who. But any time you were found guilty of assuming something before you got the data in, that phrase was thrown out to you to let you know the error of your way. Behold, I thought. And it can be used in a kind way, but mostly it wasn't. And it could be used in a kind of a negative way to tell somebody you're not the sharpest tool in the shed. And that wasn't real nice, but that's the way it was used sometimes. Nevertheless, the phrase has great and deep meaning, because what it does is it reveals a flaw we have in our character sometimes of assuming something before we let all the data come in and making some decisions based on what we can actually know. And we have to be very careful about that. In fact, when it comes right down to it, it's a tad bit arrogant, and you can understand why this guy was guilty of this. When you do know a lot, and you're pretty smart, and people have told you that, and so you believe it, and yeah, you're pretty smart, to get into a situation where maybe I think I'm a little smarter than I really am, and I don't need all the data to make a judgment about this. Whereas in the New Testament we're told, don't judge by appearance, judge righteous judgment. John 7:24, which basically says, very often appearances can be deceiving. You need to judge righteous judgment. Righteous judgment, by the way, is based on God and His Word and His truth. And if we judge by God's Word and God's truth, there are a lot of judgments we won't come to real quickly until we get all the data in. This guy had some issues. So let's look at him in verse 11. He became furious. This is one of the hallmarks of assumption. When you assume things will go a certain way and it does not go that way, sometimes people who are assuming this will happen and it doesn't get angry about things. Now, of course, I'm teaching this so that we can know how, when people assume things about us, we can handle the problem correctly. Okay? Because he had some wise servants around him, the hallmark of great people, who gave him some great advice. And that didn't keep him from making the mistake of assuming, because he was a pretty sharp guy, but the first reaction he had was to become angry. You know, when you began to tell people the truth about who we are and what the truth in the Bible is, it comes as a shock to some people sometimes, and we need to be cautious about getting reactive when they become angry about something. I know the first thought we think of very often, when somebody gets angry at us, we get back in their face. It's a wrong response. We need to understand that when somebody is faced with the truth about something, especially a truth they were not ready for, very often the response is anger. Let people vent their anger, get through that stage, get through that problem, and once they come to themselves, calm down a little bit, think about things. Wise people, like this guy, wise people come to the realization, you know, I jumped the gun there a bit. I wasn't thinking the way I should have been thinking, or I would have done what this prophet told me to do through his messenger. Okay? So in the first place, he got angry. Second thing that is a mistake with anybody that assumes something is already having it choreographed in your mind exactly how it's going. I can understand, because I'm an overthinker, and I know that's hard to believe for some of you because I don't think a lot, or some of you, but nevertheless, I'm an overthinker, and I really think through the consequences of what I say and my decisions, what I do. I want to be sure I've got all the bases covered so that I can respond appropriately to some response from something I say or do. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. We need to be prepared. As a matter of fact, Jesus made the analogy, if you're going out to build a house, you need to count the cost before you get there. You need to be prepared. So there's nothing wrong with being prepared, but that being prepared thing is a lot different than just assuming this is the way it's going to go and closing off all other avenues or possibilities. I think that plagues us, especially in evangelism. I mean, I can't speak for you, but I've been guilty of looking at somebody and go, wow, not much hope there. You know? You're just looking at the life and who they are and what they lived for the last umpty squat years. But you know, that's a wrong way to look at it. I'll confess to you right now, I have been joyfully disappointed sometimes at the way some people respond when you go, okay, I'm fine. I'll go ahead and take a shot. And it turns out wonderful. I have thankfully misjudged the situation, didn't see somebody for who they really were. And it teaches me a lesson. I hope it teaches all of us a lesson if we've gone through that experience. But you got to be careful about how you judge the cover of things. He judged the cover and immediately drew the decision, oh, this can't possibly be the right way to go. I thought he would do this. And he had it all choreographed. And I want you to note the detail. I mean, where was it anywhere that he was going to come out and stand and call on this God? And evidently he was thinking this is the way it was done where he was from. I don't know. But I mean, it's elaborate, all the stuff that he's thinking is going to happen. And it was nothing like that. A messenger came to the door, told him, go do this. And it was so simple, it was so demeaning. And I guess that's part of the problem sometimes when we make assumptions about things, we think we know. And you know, that is a little on the tinge side of arrogant, isn't it? To think we just know before we've heard the story, before we know the person, before we see the circumstance for what it really is. It's a little bit arrogant to decide I already know. I used to get it from my dad, and I've sent it on to my kids, and it's been passed on, I'm sure, generations since. But you start talking to somebody, and all you get as a response is, well, I know. I normally quit talking. And when they ask, well, why didn't you keep going, tell me more? I said, well, because you already know. Obviously, you don't need to hear it from me. Great teaching tool, by the way. Because I'm sure most folks, young folks particularly, when they start telling you, well, I know, they really don't. They just don't want to hear what you got to say. That's what it comes to. Because they don't know. If they knew, they wouldn't be doing or saying what they're doing or saying. And so therefore, this guy had it, to detail what was going to happen and how it was going to transpire. And it didn't. What a disappointment. As a matter of fact, the second part that always happens is when it doesn't go like we say, we always have substitutions. I don't know how many times, and somebody brought it up in class this morning with Boyce's class, about folks who just say, well, I want to play the guitar and when I worship God because that's my skill set and that's how I can praise God. Why can't I do that? Because I'm good at guitar. Well, are not the Abana and the Pharpar rivers of Damascus far better? It doesn't matter whether they're far better. Let's just take the devil's advocate and say, yes, they are far better rivers. It doesn't matter. That's not the one God told you to do. Now, I'll tell you for a fact, I play guitar bad, not good, but it's still prettier than my singing, if the guitar's in tune. But that's not what God asked of me. And me substituting something for what God told me to do is not going to be acceptable. And this is the problem he had. To think that way is where the flaw is. That's the flaw, thinking that I got something here that's just as good as what God is offering me. And that's not going to work. Assumption always comes with the idea that I got a better way to do things, and that's wrong. The third and last thing I point out, he could go wash in them and be clean, and so he turned away and he went away in rage. Because it didn't turn out with the way you had assumed it would, to walk away angry about it is like slamming the door to all the opportunities that could come about if you were just to slow down and listen and see if maybe there was something you didn't know about this person or this circumstance. Now, as I said before, wise men, good men, great leaders always put good people around them, because the great leaders don't want sycophants that just say, oh, yes, boss, you're wonderful, you're great. You end up with the naked king, the old story. No, quite the contrary. Good people, good leaders always surround themselves with people who are in the know, and they reference them frequently. They find out what their expertise is, and they utilize the skill set to apply it to the problem that they are in charge of and will be held accountable for. And this guy was a warrior, and he knew where the skill set was, and he had good people around him. And there were servants that came to him. And I want you to know, we as servants of humanity, when people make assumptions about who we are and about their religion and what they're doing and whether or not it's right or not, let's understand when we approach them, we need to take this lesson in hand. My Father is the way his servants approached him. There was great respect and reverence while they're sitting there, and very well could have been saying, boy, this guy's being a dummy about things, and he's so smart, he's in charge of armies, and look at what he's doing. You know, it's so easy to do that, but isn't that an assumption of sorts? To the contrary, we need to approach individuals like this with great respect, and then let's approach them with the logic and truth of the Bible. One of the things I enjoy about the Bible is its logic. I have diagrammed many a sentence in the Bible with a major premise, minor premise, and then a conclusion that's undeniable if you're a smart person, thinking person. And that's the way God wrote the Bible for us. It is very much set up on syllogism form, where you've got, here's a statement that is made, and it's true, and nobody can test it. And then there's a second statement, and yeah, that's got to be true. But when you put the two together, you come up with a conclusion that if you don't buy the conclusion, there's something wrong with your mind. And that's the way God set up things. Matthew 22 is a great example of Jesus going through with the lawyers, the Sadducees, the Pharisees, and just one right after another reasoning with them, and in public diminishing their stature as far as common sense was concerned. And then at the end of it, he posed to them a problem, and it was a logical problem. How did David say to, my Lord said, the Lord said to my Lord? How did he say that? And they didn't get it because their logic was flawed. So the Bible is incredibly logical, and what we need to do is use the Bible because it's incredibly logical to let people know what is true. If the prophet had told you something great, would you not have done it? You want to be healed, you want to be right physically. If there was some very challenging thing that he told you, you would have gone and taken care of it because you want to be made well. Now he's told you something simple, and what they're basically telling him, now that they've told you something simple and you're not doing it, how's that make you look? What does it look like when the answer really is simple? And by the way, most of our religious friends are so caught up in tradition and dogma and things that they have learned not in the Bible, but in their traditions, that when you approach them with the Bible, it will appear, as it should, extremely simple. So reasonable, so logical, so easy to understand. As I've said many times before, a lot of the doctrines that run amok today, you have to have professional help to misunderstand the Bible that badly, to be able to understand their doctrines. Folks, we have the simplicity of Christ in our hands. All we need to do is convey it. And so he went and he washed, and that's the conclusion. When somebody great realizes they've been mistaken and didn't get all the data in, they are open to the data that's given to them. Even if they got angry about it, when they calmed down and got the data right, they're going to do the right thing. I can't imagine the experience of a guy who's got leprosy, and I won't go into the grotesqueness of it, but I can get real gory about what leprosy is and how serious a disease it is. Just kidding. You go down in the water. Can you imagine everybody that's ever experienced something like cancer in their family or in themselves? If you were told, go out here to the Leon, dip in it 7 times, and when you come out, you'll be free of cancer. There'd be a rush to the river to get into every bit of water you got out there to try to get free of it. But can you imagine coming up that 6th time, and you still got leprosy? But when he came up the 7th time, it says his flesh was like that of a child or a babe. A little child, verse 14. I can make the transition quite easily to those of us who have lived lives in which there have been incidents and occurrences we're not terribly proud of. I can't speak for you, but if I were a bet man, and I'm not, I bet that many of you have experienced things that you're not proud of. But you know what? When you come up out of that water, you are a new creature. And what's cool is from that point on, all you have to do is call on God in repentance trying to change your way the best you can and ask forgiveness. And once again, every time, you're clean. I hope we don't underestimate or disregard the power and the comfort and the hope we have being a Christian, and knowing if we'll just not assume things, we'll just go do what we've been told to do, and when we do it, we know God will bring us up clean and pretty and shiny and new, even though we don't feel like it. I know, I understand. But in God's eyes, really, that's what matters. He makes us clean again. We have that available because of the blood of Christ. We have something he experienced, Naaman experienced one time, and it was pretty dramatic for him, I am sure. He went back and tried to give gifts to Elijah, and then ended up giving them to Gehazi. But nevertheless, he was so grateful. And he even changed his worship style. Notice that too in the text following this. The whole point being, are we really grateful? Or we have just assumed that we're just where we are and we're somebody, we're okay and everything's all right? Or do we really focus on the idea that we have been forgiven and we can be brand new every time we go to God? You know, this guy made some assumptions, but the happy end of the story is he had smart people around him to help him realize how important the gift that he was given was. And I'm here to tell you and encourage you to encourage me and encourage each other. We have a great gift as Christians to be new. And we shouldn't make assumptions about other people, because we need to share what we have with them and have them enjoy the same comfort and hope and confidence that we do. If you're not right with God, I encourage you to be right with God this evening. Be new, be fresh, be sparkling, just totally different, because you go to God in repentance if you're a Christian, and ask forgiveness. If you're not a Christian, you need to become one, because that new start is the new life you can live for the rest of your life in this existence, and then be in heaven. If you want to be in heaven and you need to respond, we offer that opportunity and an invitation. Won't you stand as we sing?